Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. I have a very special guest today who is going to be talking about a part of our history that I bet most of you do not know. I love it when we can learn about our culture, our history, and how so many things connect together. Let me tell you about our guest. He is the president and CEO of 1128 Entertainment Group. He is a known figure in music, television, and philanthropy. With a background in R&B music and executive leadership, he has collaborated with lots of folks, including industry icons like Jay-Z and J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez. He has also been recognized for his contributions and received accolades, including June Archer Day. His name, he is June Archer in Hartford, Connecticut, and being named one of the 100 most influential Blacks in the state of Connecticut by the NAACP. Well, he has a new project, a wonderful documentary called Stepping into the Shade that looks at the history of cigar making and tobacco in the state of Connecticut that is going to be screened in Westport, Connecticut on June 1st. So please join us as we talk about this film, hear more about June Archer's career, and about our history, a piece of our history that we do not know, or at least most of us don't. Please join me in welcoming June Archer.
Miss Cole, how are you? Thank you so much for having me and for that amazing intro. It always excites me when you get to hear some of the things that you're doing. It inspires you and then also motivates you to want to do more. So thank you so
That's
much.
true. And so the whole purpose of Dreamleapers is to inspire others to access and activate their dreams. So when they see people doing it and putting forth all the effort that it takes, I think it really does inspire all of us. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. And so I remember as a child when we would drive into the so-called country, because Baltimore is the city, there were so many tobacco farms, and we would see these huge leaves. And the tobacco leaves are gorgeous. They're these beautiful, I feel like it almost looks like fronds of palm trees,
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, and I remember seeing the leaves hanging in cabins or whatever they call them. I saw in your documentary, we see some spaces like that. Now, this was for cigarettes at that point. I think that's what these tobacco leaves were for. I had no idea that the tobacco industry, in particular in the North, became something that the people in the Great Migration, actually, some of them came to tobacco farms. And you share so much history in your documentary series. How did you know about that?
Well, the story got introduced to me. I should say the project got introduced to me while doing an artist in residence at the University of Connecticut and Eastern Connecticut State University, where I was lecturing. And these two professors, told me I had done a great job, and they wanted to know if I was interested in being a moderator for this project called Stepping into the Shade. So I said, tell me a little bit about it, and let me see if there's interest. Do I gravitate towards what you're talking about? And Miss Harriette, as soon as they told me about this, I fell in love with it. Uh, they said, well, this is about the history of tobacco and where the famous cigar wrapper leaf comes from. And I said, well, I picked tobacco as a rite of passage as a teenager when I got my working papers. For 2
Really?
summers, I worked on a tobacco field. And they said, well, this is a story about migrants from Puerto Rico and immigrants from Jamaica that come specifically to Hartford to work on the farms. And I said, that's it. I want to be a part of it. I want to executive produce it. I want to, whatever I can do. I said, I am of Jamaican descent. Like my parents were immigrants from Jamaica who came over here. My grandfather immigrated to the States to work on farms, picking the apples. I have to be a part of it. And as soon as I read, there was a book called Soldiers of the Soil by Miss Johnson, who happened to be a stepmom of mine growing up. And I didn't realize she was the one that wrote the book. And it talks about all the history and the forefathers that came to this country during World War II. to work for the government, essentially, on these farms because the War and Food Administration was seeking help because all the men were going off to war, and they
Mm.
needed to cultivate picking apples, sugarcane, all of the agriculture that was going on in the United States. And Miss Harriet, I fell in love with the story, and as I dove in, I started reading this book and said, I know a lot of these people because my parents were mentees of these people. My parents were babysat by some of these people. I was babysat. I can reach out to all these people. And as I started to reach out and hear these stories and we started to film, there were things that I would share with my mother after filming. And she said to me, I I I didn't know about that. And I said, you didn't know about that. As a young lady who came over here from Jamaica, has been Jamaican all my life. How many other people don't know of these stories? And other stories start to weave in this documentary like MLK making his trek.
Yeah, well, wait. Let's before we go to MLK, so there's so many things you said. First of all, my husband is Jamaican, and his mother and grandmother came here first, for opportunity. They didn't work in that particular way, but that migration of many people from the Caribbean to the States for opportunity has lived for generations.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about it being people coming from other countries to work those well, they are
They are
plantations.
plantations. Let's and
And
we
by the way,
unpack that as well.
yeah, I mean, yeah, they are plantations and there was exploitation. I think one of the things that's interesting that you explore in this documentary series is you get people to tell the truth. Like you went to was it Americus, Georgia?
America's Georgia.
Yeah, so the mayor you spoke to he's from a long lineage of wealth in Americus, Georgia. And while he didn't say it exactly, we know he said his family had plantations. That means that they had enslaved people working for them. And you could see, and I really am excited for people to see your documentary because you can see as he is telling the truth, he's also feeling what it means for his family to have accumulated all this wealth on the backs of people who worked for free.
Yes.
And then what did
Yes.
you discover about the economics of this tobacco farming?
Well, the economics, as we find out, was more of a bait and switch. So what happens is you get these migrants to come over to the United States to go to Connecticut. You get those who are down south who have been working on cotton farms, picking cotton, to come up to Connecticut on these farms to sort of do exactly what they were doing, but you gave them the opportunity to say, hey, for a better life, for better wages. And it wasn't for a better life, it weren't for better wages. And they came up and found themselves in the same situation. The only thing they didn't deal with as much was some of the blatant racism that was going on down in the South. And
Mhm.
what we find out is there was a great migration of just those that were in Americus, Georgia, because of a pivotal situation that happens, and we talk about it with the mayor of Americus, that allows them, I shouldn't say allows them, that motivates them to get up out of Americus, Georgia, and make their way up north.
Yeah. You know what? I recently met a woman. Let me back up and say I had never heard of Americus, Georgia,
Me either.
about until about a month ago. And I met a woman whose name is Dr. Shirley Reese, who was one of 14 children, girls, who were held in a stockade in Leesburg, Georgia in 1963 during the civil rights era. They were swept up. They were at a peaceful protest to integrate a movie theater. They were swept up and held for 60 days, and no one knew where they were because of civil rights. And they were from Americus, Georgia. So I'm talking to her and I'm going, first of all, what we are discovering, June, is that there are so many stories that we don't know. We know the giant stories of, we know Martin Luther King, although you're about to tell us about something that we don't know about him. We don't know. We don't know so much about the hardship that our people faced because of greed,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And that part of the country, I think it's a tiny little town, isn't it? Americus, Georgia?
If you threw a rock, you would land in another another town. It is I can't even say it's 1 square mile.
Right.
Yeah.
And so much history. And I mean, when I saw in your documentary that you visited Americus, Georgia, I'm like, okay, this is the world kind of saying how connected we are, even when we don't know it. I literally have been studying Black history in one way or another for my entire career, and I never heard of it before a month ago. And now you
Wow.
have it in your documentary. And often, one of the things that we see about Black culture in the South in particular, in tiny little towns, there's not usually Black wealth in those towns.
No.
But that man you talked to, the mayor, was in a home that was a homestead, and it was amazing to be in that space. And he was very open and honest about the wealth and then when you go to one of the farms where you see the people working with him, they're hanging the leaves. This is another white man who admits that folks aren't necessarily making as much money as they might want. Were there any Black people who owned any of these farms?
No, there were absolutely none. There was one gentleman in Americus
Mm-hmm.
who owned his farm that was given to him um, from those who had passed on. And the crazy part is, Miss Harriet, is at the end of filming, he walks up to me, and I'm the only person of color on in the crew,
Mm-hmm.
and the host. And he walks up to me and specifically hands me a plastic bag, probably a gallon bag. And I'm looking at this bag, Miss Harriet, and I'm saying to myself, I know he's not giving me what I think he's giving me. And it was a bag of cotton, like
Ooh.
raw cotton. And he says, I want you to feel this. And I put my hand in the bag and I
This is the
feel it.
Black farmer.
This is the Black farmer.
Okay.
He goes, tell me what you think. I said, I don't know what to think. He said, be proud. I own over 600 acres
Mm.
and I now have equity. Those who came before me left this for me. And I want you to have this.
Wow. That's
And,
powerful.
and I didn't know what to do with it. And along my travel back from Americus, Georgia, through the rest of the time, we were gone for maybe a week. We went to Tampa at that time, went to North Carolina, went to Atlanta. And everywhere I went, I shared the
Mm.
story of him gifting this to me. And I told people, put your hand in this bag and I want you to take a piece and take it with you and take a piece for someone else. Because I do believe when you are blessed, you should not covet any blessing.
Mm.
And you should share your experience. You should share your gifts. You should share information with as many people as you can, because it comes back exponentially. It comes back 100-fold, even when you don't expect it.
That is so true. Hey guys, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We're having a pretty deep conversation right here with Mr. June Archer, who is the host of a new documentary series called Stepping into the Shade. And it's all about uncovering the history of Connecticut tobacco. I don't think a lot of people even knew that tobacco was grown in Connecticut. And we learned so much about the history and the connection to generations before and after as a result of this. June, I want to tell you, I live in Harlem in New York City, and there's a really powerful statue of Harriet Tubman in my neighborhood. And it's on a little triangle, and you see the roots of the earth and trees coming out of her skirts. Well, someone, I don't know who it is, I can't name the person to acknowledge them, but someone has planted cotton all around the this triangle. And is a man who is often there, and he will point it out to people as they come through. Because look, a lot of people, period, haven't touched cotton. Certainly not Northerners, city dwellers, urban dwellers. But to understand touching cotton and picking cotton, your hands got cut up because there are so many thorns attached to that beautiful, soft center. And it was grueling work. It was grueling work. And even though tobacco is not cotton, it's not it doesn't create the same kind of pain. It's still working in the fields. And according to the gentleman that you interviewed, uh, you have to be so careful, especially if you for the tobacco that you want to roll the cigars with, because it can't be damaged.
Yeah, it shouldn't have any blemishes at all. The finest wrapper that you will see has to be not too spiny, has to be smooth, no blemishes, and sweet. And that's the reason why it's grown under shade, most of them. And one of the stories I talk about is, about 15 years ago, I was at the Grammys and I was at an event on a rooftop downtown LA. And this gentleman was boasting about being a lover of cigars. And I asked him, so then you know where the wrapper comes from, that famous wrapper comes from that Cuban cigar. He's like, Cuba. And I'm like, no, guess again. He's like, Dominican Republic. Nah, guess again. He says, how would you know? And I said, well, I picked tobacco. So you could guess again. He's like, I have no idea. I said, it comes from Connecticut. He's like, absolutely not. I said, no, it does. And people around us stopped and said, why is that? And I said, because of the volcanic sand that flows through the Connecticut River Valley. And he says, how did you know this? I said, I picked it as a kid for 2 summers.
So June, why were you picking tobacco? How did that happen?
Well, there was a summer program. And as a rite of passage, when you get your working papers, from where I come from, Windsor, Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut area, Bloomfield, you, for the summers, were able to work on a tobacco farm, and they would have a bus that would come by the area neighborhoods and pick up all the kids and transport them to the tobacco farms. And you would be assigned a role, you and a partner. So you would partner up with a friend. My partner was my childhood friend, Jason Harris. And we would get in a row and we would take the sheet, be a plastic sheet, and you roll it all the way down the end of the aisle. And these aisles could be about anywhere between 40 to 50 yards long. And then you would sit down and you would pick the leaves, the bottom leaves, and put them properly on your lap. And you would scoot and pick the leaves and scoot and pick the leaves and scoot. And that was our way of making money for the summer, that when you went back to school, you had some spending money that you could, hopefully your parents will allow you to spend at least half of it to get your school clothes. So it's just a way responsibility.
Do you remember how much you were paid? Do you have any recollection of that?
I don't, but I know that at the end of the week, we would make maybe $425. And back then, that was a lot of money.
So you paid well.
We were paid well for summer, but it was hot. There were bugs out. There were frogs out. There were snakes. There were it's just hot. The tar would be stuck on your clothes. So you would go home and just feeling sticky with all this black substance on you. But at the end of the summer, you could say to yourself, look how much money I made for the summer.
You worked.
And it kept you out of trouble. And there's a way to really have fun with your friends. But it wasn't.
How old were you when you were doing that?
14, 15, 16 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's so many myths that we can bust right now. One of them, I think a lot of people think of Connecticut as, and this could be true, but as one of the richest states in the country, and primarily white. Yeah. People do not necessarily think of Connecticut as being a state with a large Black population. Whenever I hear about somebody who's from Connecticut, I think, really? Okay. So tell us about the Black population that you are aware of, And, who are the Black folks there?
Well, most of the Black folks come from down south, and then the
Hmm.
rest of them are immigrants and migrants. One of a lot of things that people don't know, and they will learn through this documentary, is there is a large or the largest population of West Indians in Connecticut. However, because it is smaller than New York and Florida,
Mm.
right? It may not see, but per just West Indians and Jamaican, like that is the most populated area that you will see West Indians come from Jamaica. And when people think of Connecticut, they think of the Constitution State, the Nutmeg State. Uh, they may even it's the insurance capital of the world, or it once was, right? And it was a state where predominantly white folks would go to retire wealth in the northern part of Connecticut, or I should say Westport, Stamford, like highly populated with people that have accumulated wealth. But a
Mhm.
lot of people don't understand that those who came, the people of color who came and brought their culture, their way of life, their music, their love for one another, their love for their neighbor, is due in part that when they came up there, what they saw was something different from the South, right? For the Black Americans, as MLK says, he was living in God's country when he was in Connecticut,
Mhm.
and where he would write to his mom, and that was because he said when I sat at the counter up north, no one looked at me, no one told me I couldn't sit there. Not that,
Right.
that there wasn't any racism, but it wasn't as blatant
Mhm.
as it was down south.
Right. Which certainly is a difference. And when I'm remembering my husband's grandmother, who has passed on now, but she when she first came to the States from Jamaica, she did go to Connecticut. She didn't stay there. She ended up in Brooklyn, and then of course they retired to Florida, because that's often the way that a trajectory is. But you're right, Connecticut was the first place that she went, I'm sure, because she knew people who were there already. So this is just it's another part of our history that many people do not know. So as a young person, just with your working papers, were able to work in on the tobacco farms, you share in this documentary that Morehouse students were part of, I guess, this work program in the summers, where Morehouse students had the invitation to come and work on these farms. That is so fascinating to me. We think about all of the things that the Morehouse men are taught. You know, there's something about a Morehouse man. You can recognize them. They've got great manners and style and understand about looking, building a future and a vision. I was flabbergasted to learn that part of that vision was working on a plantation. Tell
Yeah,
us about that.
yeah. During that time, during the war, because there were so many people away at war, and at one point they could no longer pull the wool over the eyes of those migrants and immigrants that they had once, the Puerto Ricans, the Dominicans, the Jamaicans who came to work, the Polish that came to work. They had to seek employment elsewhere. So they looked towards the HBCUs and made a deal with the HBCUs through a gentleman by the name of Arthur Johnson. And through that, they brought Morehouse men up, a few other HBCUs, but one of the most popular figures was Martin Luther King Jr. And what a lot of people don't know, and they'll find out, is he got his love for preaching and the civil rights while being in Connecticut. Something that we've never been taught, and spent a lot of time in Simsbury, Connecticut. And we dive so deep into this that it's almost a selfish act that a lot of this history was left out. As you mentioned, Miss Harriet, we didn't know about America's Georgia. We didn't know about MLK spending time in Connecticut. We didn't even know about Malcolm X spending time in Connecticut. And we dive into that as well, because a lot of things around civil rights happened in Connecticut as well. So we only equate it to being down south, and but we talk about the Black Panther Party, but we never talk about them being cohesive and working together in a lot of ways, and how there weren't just Black men and women in the Black Panther Party. There were plenty of other people of color that were for the movement and creating the lunch program and the breakfast program. There were so many things that happened in Connecticut that we tie all of these pieces together, going from Atlanta, the HBCUs, going down to North Carolina, where Arthur Johnson was, Tampa, Florida, making our way up to Connecticut, talking about Jamaica and Puerto Rico and Poland, and how it is somewhat of a love story that all these people are sent to Connecticut to
Mhm.
work on these farms. And you realize that this piece of tobacco that people smoke that creates this culture that men and women are able to enjoy now touches over, I believe I've heard 100 hands before it is smoked. That to me is what you call an American history story.
It really is. And, you know, as the person you spoke to said, where's that wrapping paper come from? We certainly think of Cuba first.
Right.
Cuba, we think of Cuba and cigars. We don't really think of America or let alone Connecticut for cigars. And to find that this paper is being used all over the world to wrap cigars, it's fascinating. What did you learn about cigars today and how it is impacting the industry? Because I know there was a person talking on your documentary about how it used to be so chic to smoke cigars anyhow, and now to smoke anywhere is usually an issue. So you have to find where you do it. And it's not certainly as welcoming for lots of reasons, just smoking in general. But smoking cigars, as there have been so many restrictions on smoking at all, what has happened to that industry, to the businesses that are still farming tobacco?
Well, from a business standpoint, it is so expensive to grow shade tobacco. There's only one more shade tobacco farm that is left in the Northeast. Only one. Everybody else is growing broadleaf because it's expensive to employ people to come over to work on these tobacco fields. So it has been impacted where now they send the seeds out to Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and other countries that have a warmer climate that can actually duplicate the process that was done in Connecticut under the shade. So you'll see when you go in a cigar shop, it'll still say Connecticut wrapper because they pay homage to the fact that these seeds are from Connecticut. However, it may be grown in Honduras, may be grown in the Dominican Republic or Cuba, but this is the seed that is birthed from the Connecticut River Valley.
So
So
both things are true, that
both things
the
are true now.
the actual wrapper could be from Honduras or wherever, DR, but the seed is from Connecticut.
Correct. And that's just the financial impact that happens there. But in
Mhm,
terms of the culture, Miss Harriet, it is growing, and we're finding that young people are smoking cigars.
mhm.
Women are now part of that culture, and they are diving into it, 10 toes down and opening their own businesses. And one of the things that I'm very proud of in this documentary is we stop along the way and make sure that we highlight tobacco shops and lounges that are owned by people of color
Mhm.
to give that balance to share that. Although this was, some people may say it was bastardized by non-people of color, because this plant was taken from the indigenous people and it wasn't supposed to be sold to begin with. It's what we learned in this documentary. It was to be shared. We talked about that a
Mhm.
few minutes ago, right? To be shared, to be used as a sacrificial thing to celebrate our ancestors, to celebrate life. And then somehow, as we always do, find a way to industrialize these things
Yes.
for sale.
Mhm. Well, so how many episodes will there be in this series?
It is a 6 episode series. And those who have the opportunity to come to the premiere will see a culmination of the 6 episodes in one. And it's going to feel like an episode. So that we give you a piece of every story. There's a HBCU story. There's a a Black history story. There is a story about segregation. There's a Jamaican story. There's a Puerto Rican story. There's a story about the girls from Virginia and Pittsburgh who actually come up and work on the farms and have to find a way to get along with the Black girls who are on these farms as well, and how they live together. But it's all in the name of making money, to save money to go to school. And one of the other beautiful pieces, if I can share, is we talk about racism, segregation, we talk about lynching in this documentary. Not to shed light on the bad, but to shed light on how, if we just lead with humanity, what we could do. And as we unpacked a lot of these stories, especially white women who came from Pittsburgh, Florida, that even though they were told not to mingle, speak to, hang out with, congregate with the PRs, as they were titled, that they found that these men were gorgeous, they were beautiful, they were nice, they were handsome, they were so strong, and they made them feel special. And I know that there were people who turned down the opportunity to be a part of this because the tobacco industry had gotten such a bad rap, and they thought that this might have been the angle. But this angle is about how we come together, leading with humanity, that this one thing can bring people together when looked at from a different perspective. When we revisit history, to educate ourselves on the proper history without leaving too much behind, to understand the impact that we all have collectively as human beings first, and how that could be celebrated.
Wonderful. Hey guys, this is Dreamleapers with Harriette Cole. We are in conversation with June Archer, who is hosting a 6-part series of a documentary called Stepping into the Shade. And it's all about the history of Connecticut tobacco. That's right, Connecticut tobacco. We're not talking about where Cuba, we're not talking about Dominican Republic, even Maryland, where I'm from. Connecticut tobacco, Stepping into the Shade. And there is a premiere on June 1st in Westport, Connecticut, and June Archer is going to tell us all about that right now. So people can come.
Yes.
You can come to this event. You said that it's sort of a culmination of the 6 episodes people will be able to see at this event. What is driving doing this event at this time, and what's next?
Well, our hope is we have an opportunity on the table right now with a particular organization, well, I should say organization, network. And we believe it's a bigger than where it could live right now. And we want to have the opportunity to be able to share it so that we could get the momentum and just get people understanding. Like it's not, we're not trying to bastardize this. It's not about the money. It's about the history, right? It's about shedding light on the people who toiled in the soil, the people that came before us. So on June 1st at the Westport Library, we're going to share some of these pieces of each episode to get people excited, to get people educated, to get people behind what we're doing, to give the push that we believe is needed, to have a Netflix there or a Hulu or a National Geographic or a History Channel, because we believe it needs to be there. And we need more people of color in those spaces telling those stories, because we will be a better world for it when we all are able to share our stories. So June 1st, myself, the producers, Brian Day, Kristen Morgan, people that have donated their time to be in the film, Dr. Jeffrey Ogbar, Dr. Fiona Verna, Dr. Jason Chang, Michael Chambers, so many more. I don't want to leave anybody out, but those individuals will be there. Leslie Mays, an amazing journalist, will be our moderator. And it's going to be an amazing night with whiskey tasting to pair with cigars. There'll be live cigar rolling. You'll see how cigars are rolled with Connecticut wrappers. So you'll see that. And people will be able to go home with a cigar. And if they like, they can pair it with a bourbon or a whiskey and relive the moments that we share that night. So we're super excited.
That's really, really exciting. And we have created a very special VIP package for WBAI listeners. And you're going to get a taste of everything. You get to come to the VIP reception, which is early. You get to meet and talk to the people who are making the film. You get some great gifts. You get some cigars, you get some whiskey, you get to see the film, a lot of great things. And so we're hoping that WBAI will really support this effort because it's interesting, it's fascinating knowing our history. So thank you for being so generous in that way, June, you and your team. I want to turn for a moment because, as you know, when we see you in your space, we see all kinds of music stuff behind you, and I mentioned that in the beginning about your career. And I often say I've had 39 lives. I've done a lot of different things in my career. That certainly has included working with the music industry a lot. And I'm curious as to what that part of your career has been. It looks like there's some gold records back there. Tell us what you have done in the music industry and what impact you think your work has made.
Well, my career started out as a recording artist signed to Elektra Records by the great, amazing, beautiful, uh, why am I losing her name right now? Sylvia Rohn,
Sylvia
who
Rohn,
I,
yeah.
I love dearly. And we had the opportunity to, as young people who emulated New Edition and wanted to be like Michael Jackson, we heard our records on the radio. We saw ourselves on video, BT, VH1, MTV. And from there, I had the opportunity to become an executive and going back into the business after being a recording artist and work with the likes of Jay-Z, Beyonce, Chris Brown, Mario, Marion, 50 Cent. And then my career shifted and then authored 2 books of inspiration, one for adults, one for children, created television shows on Fuse, ESPN, and a documentary about independent artists and independent producers because I love the independent movement. I love those who create something out of nothing with their hands and with their minds. And from there, the impact has been, how do I give back to young people who want to live in a creative space when they've taken music and arts and culture out of school? So I created the June Archer School of Arts, where we teach kids how to DJ, graphic design, filmmaking, photography, animation, podcasting, journalism. And we create a record company inside of the classroom because we know that project-based learning works. Our young people are tired of the old way of learning. They may not see the future in math or the future in reading and writing, but when you give it to them in a different form and say, hey, if you want to be in arts and entertainment, if you want to have a record deal, or you want to win a Grammy, how about all the opportunities and the careers behind the people who make that magic happen? And what we find is a lot of our young people like being behind the scenes and making magic happen. So that has been the impact, but it is women like you who inspire me, Miss Harriette, Sylvia Rohn, Cynthia Horner, who put me in her magazine, Amy Dubois Barnett, Susan Taylor, women who had been pushing culture for so many years and supporting not just Black culture and women, men and women of color, but supporting men and lifting us up. And I am a product of all of the work that you guys, or I should say you women, have done in periodicals. I still call them periodicals, magazines, because of what you all produced and shared, what it looks like to live in our Black and brown girl and boy magic, but also what Black excellence looks like and what Black elegance looks like. And because of that, I created the 100 Men of Color Black Tie Galen Awards to honor 100 men of color throughout the state of Connecticut and Western Mass. And of course, the 100 Women of Color, honoring women of color throughout the state of Connecticut and Western Mass who are doing great things in our communities, who have been the backbone and pillars of our community, and to give them their flowers and give them their moment to say, I love you, we appreciate you, and thank you.
That's a beautiful thing to do. And, you know, we've heard too often when folks in the working world, you know, in corporate America or places where there's a majority white population, well, I couldn't find somebody of color who does this or that. We looked, we couldn't find so and so. And, you know, I can imagine some people could have said to you, there aren't 100 Black people in Connecticut to honor, let alone more than once.
I've been told that.
Right.
I was told that. I won't name any names. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but it was a particular mayor who happened to say that, and a few other people. But here's the thing: when you inspire your community, and for me, it was about showing our young people from where I come from that you have Jay-Z and Beyonce in your own community. And for us, it was making sure I brought Eric LaSalle back home because he's one of ours. Bringing back David Usry because he was one of ours. Bringing Anika Noni Rose home because she is one of ours, and so many countless others, and letting them know that, yeah, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be Jay-Z and Beyonce. I love them, but you don't have to look that far. If you just look in your own
Right.
backyard, there's
They
so
literally
many.
are there.
We are here and doing amazing things. And when we give our young people these combinations to succeed, I always talk about my cousin Julian, who took a love for music and a love for art and put it together and had the opportunity to win a Grammy for creating the Jack Johnson session for the Miles Davis album. When you give them the combination to succeed, he doesn't produce music, he doesn't sing, he doesn't rap, he doesn't dance, but he loves music and he combined it with art. And he has sold over 90 million albums, creating album covers for 50 Cent, G Unit, Eminem, and the J-Lo logo, the 50 Cent logo. But we want our young people to thrive in spaces where they were told, maybe you should get a real job. Maybe you should have a backup plan. But when you give them the combinations to succeed, Miss Harriette, what does that world look like for our young people?
Such a beautiful thing. And look, this is about vision and supporting vision. And too often people operate in fear. And often for what we think are the right reasons. If you talk to you are from a family of immigrants, and so I know your family was like, you should be a lawyer or a doctor because that's what you were supposed to be. That's what many people in our country are told. If their parents or grandparents struggled, then that's what you're supposed to be. And to break out of that and to pursue your dreams works best when there is support for that. I want to talk a little bit more about this school that you created. When did you make it? Where is it? And how is it operating now?
Well, one of the gifts from COVID was I had a young man, Antoine, who is my program coordinator right now, ask me to come in and talk to these kids about my experiences in the music business. And he had a grant that he needed at least 22 kids to sign up to this program. And he gave me a call and said he had 3 kids signed up. But if I could I present something that he could show in an open house to attract young kids to want to be a part of this program? Well, I sent him a video talking about what it is that I do, who I am, who I've worked with. And he calls me back urgently. He said, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, we have over 100 kids that want to be in this class to hear you talk about the music business. And we did it for a semester. And it was amazing. These kids and the testimonials afterwards.
And where did you do this? Where were you?
This was at, I can't remember the school right now.
But he found the school
in Hartford, Connecticut. It was Jamoki Academy was the first school, Jamoki Academy, and it was elementary school.
Wow.
And Aunt said, this was so great. You should do it again. And I said, well, I'm just glad that they enjoyed it. Right. I just got a great feeling of just sharing these stories. And I said, what would I do? What would I do with doing this? He's like, you should start your own school. I said, Aunt, what would I call it? The June Archer School of Arts? He said, there it is. And the crazy part was, as COVID hit, a lot of my friends who are creatives obviously couldn't work. They couldn't DJ. My friends who were DJs, my photographers couldn't work. My filmmakers couldn't do any filming. They couldn't shoot any weddings, right? So I just came up with what I thought was a genius idea. I said, I know you aren't a teacher. And I went to all my friends. I said, let's teach these kids how to DJ. Let's set up a record company in the classroom. And let's do some project-based learning where, and I was very intentional, Ms. Harriette. I wanted our young women of color to be in positions of power so that, sometimes a barrier of entry is, do you have managerial experience?
That's true.
So I would ask these young women, you have first dibs of being the president or the vice president of the label. Or I need you to be the VP of publicity of marketing, sales, promotion. I need you to be in these positions. And we set up these record companies, and my friends who were DJs taught the DJ class. My friends that were doing graphic design taught the graphic design class. So we create business cards for these kids so they have their names on it. We create record company logos and teach them how to use, graphic design, Adobe, Canva. And I had my photographers teach a photography class and a filmmaking class, and it just took off. And now we are in 18 schools in Connecticut, one in Massachusetts, 2 boys and girls clubs. And I just got back from Valencia, Spain, and we're working on a partnership with Berkeley in Valencia to bring the program there. And it's been an amazing impact, and it's growing by leaps and bounds.
Any of it online, and was it online during the pandemic?
During pandemic, we were doing it virtually, and now we're doing it hybrid, and now we are back in school, and now we have had the opportunity to actually be in school during school instead of an after school enrichment program. Because what we're trying to do now is create a pipeline of career exploration that we can get young people into the jobs that need people to do these jobs, but teaching them, hey, how about doing sound design that you could work at Steamboat and create the sound design for submarines and tugboats and making them quieter, right? How about doing sound design, even though if you don't work at ESPN, you could work at Hartford, Stanley Black & Decker, right? Or Hartford Hospital, doing marketing, social media, all these things that we're learning from the entertainment space, but it's allowing us to bring art and music back into schools by putting sugar in the medicine, because we talk about learn how to read the Billboard charts. And what do these young people love? They want to know who's getting the bag. So we teach them how to read how much money Cardi B's making and Chris Brown is making, Taylor Swift, and read the charts. How much did they go up in percentage this week? How much are they going to go down? If they're making 12 cents a record, what does that mean? Ooh. And they're doing multiplication, division, subtraction, percentages, decimal point, and they are excited. And teachers are like, they don't see the necessary things in math. Like they don't, but you guys are making it fun.
Yes. And making it relevant.
So
when people think I'm just doing math because my teacher said I have to do it, that's one thing. But when you realize, oh, this connects to life and creativity and people I respect, then it's a whole different story. This is so exciting. Tell me something, because I know folks who are listening are like, well, can I go to that school? Can my kid go to that school? Is there a way for people who are not there to have access in any way hybridly to any of these classes?
Right now, we are working on what we call a Saturday Academy through the Boys and Girls Clubs on a global level.
Yeah.
We went to a conference with them, and we're trying to figure out how for those young people who aren't in the school districts that we're in, how can they actually be a part of this program? So we're partnering with the Boys and Girls Club. And right now, one of our great friends and supporters, Sam Gray of the Hartford Boys and Girls Club, which is the first club ever in the nation, has created a June Archer School of Arts room in his new Boys and Girls Club site. And we are hoping that a lot of the other Boys and Girls Club follow suit, that we'll be able to be across the country, where you just have to be a club kid and join in. But we know that our parents have fallen in love with this program because of what we've done with their children. We call them our student executives and student creatives. And one of the things I didn't get to tell you, Ms. Harriet, is when our kids leave the program after the semester, and they can come back multiple times, but the top student gets to leave with a DJ controller.
Oh,
They get to leave with an iPad. They get to leave with a camera, because what we want is we want them to continue to do what they're doing, because we know that music is introduced in school where you get to bring home a violin and a flute and a clarinet and a horn. But what happens when you give them a creative space to continue doing those things? It helps them figure out what they want as a career and still have the love of music. But we gift them with the tools that they had in class, that we hope that they'll continue doing it. And we found out they do continue to do it, and they love it, and they come back and they're ambassadors for their fellow peers and students in school.
Now I know why there's a June Archer Day. There should be. You are a motivator, my friend. This is so great. And as we leave, I want to remind folks that the documentary Stepping into the Shade is premiering on June 1st in Westport, Connecticut. We will share the information on how you can learn about it, how you may be the lucky WBAI winner to be able to come to this event. Thank you, June Archer. Thank you for all of the work that you have done and that you're doing. And thank you for working to create Stepping into the Shade. It's really very well done. I learned so much and can't wait to see more. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I love you, sister. Keep doing what you're doing. You are inspiration for more people than you know. And thank you for just pouring into me, even when you didn't know it, by all of the contributions that you did at every institution that you were in. It made a difference. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. And thank you, all of you, for tuning in to Dreamleapers. I want you to go to this event on June 1st in Westport, Connecticut. Stepping into the Shade. You will be thrilled to make that trek. It's not that far, and you're going to enjoy it. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.